Now please welcome, in his address to the graduates of 2019, the President of Archbishop Mitty, Mr. Tim Brosnan.
Members of the class of 2019, each year I get this one last chance to sum up some of this community's hopes and prayers for you, to say something profound, to give some sage advice, to take a brief walk with you down memory lane, and to get even with a few of you, all in about 13 minutes, so here goes. In these past few weeks, and certainly today, many sentences have begun with those simple words, remember when. As in, remember when you dressed up as your favorite salad dressing during Spirit Week. Ah, but a thinly disguised excuse to wear togas to school. Toga as in Rome, as in Caesar salad, as in Caesar salad dressing. And of course, there were lots of ranchers this day, lots of French and Italian folks also, and then there were those of you who forgot to dress up, so you decided to go to Amor and procure dozens of those little mustard packets, which you proceed to tape all over your bodies, honey mustard dressing, if you will. Remember Powder Puff this year? I don't think the underclassmen will ever forget it. Final score, seniors 51, sophomores and juniors combined, 0. Remember though when the sophomores crushed you guys in the Monarch Madness tug of war? That was just to make sure you were listening and to keep you humble. But you must admit, that Monarch Madness faux pas caused you a little bit of anxiety. I could see it in your faces. Especially when moments before you also lost the limbo contest. Remember when Lucas was beaten by the sophomore girl who, as it turns out, moonlights as a contortionist for Cirque du Soleil? And remember those nerve-wracking moments waiting for the results when the entire student body sang the liturgical theme song, Fearless, which was my favorite moment of the night. And speaking of Fearless, remember Andy hitting that ridiculously high note in the middle of that song all year long. And I will certainly remember the sheer joy on your faces when it was finally announced that after 4 long years, you were crowned Monarch Madness champions. Speaking of champions, take a moment now to remember the big and little roles you played in the garnering of at least 6 more league and CCS athletic championships, with 2 more possible this afternoon, by the way. Softball at 3 at Pal, baseball at 7 at Muni. With 43 members of this class moving on to play at the next level, it is no wonder that the banners in the rafters have begun to block out the light in the gym, but that's a good problem to have, I guess. Remember a few weeks ago when we held our annual Senior Awards Assembly? Remember when I introduced Ishan and Malavika? You exploded out of your chairs and gave them a heartfelt, deafening ovation. Such student appreciation for remarkable academic scholarship is at the heart of our school culture. And I'm so proud to be part of a school community where intellect is so deeply valued. Indeed, intellect and faith are not mutually exclusive at Archbishop Mitty, nor are intellect and fun. This is the reason why we celebrate Mass and build robots, why we analyze literature and attend retreats, why we learn calculus and dress up in pharaoh costumes. Those were very cool, by the way. Remember, as was alluded to earlier, winning your 4th straight state championship for speech and debate. This 4-peat is one of the most remarkable accomplishments in state history. Imagine this, the speech and debate members of the class of 2019 have never had a season that didn't result in a state championship. Amazing. And speaking of amazing, remember the talent displayed at the annual Performing Arts Assembly again this year. Remember Connor getting Shania and her dad, aka Mr. Salas, to join in a Zumba class in front of the whole school. Shania, we certainly, sincerely apologize. And remember one of the most successful performing arts seasons ever on the Kincaid stage, featuring Cinderella, Noises Off, and Bright Star, which was recently honored as the best high school musical this past year in the state of California. Of course, not all of our memories are ones that result in applause or the public garnering of banners and trophies. The members of the Mitty Advocacy Project certainly remember their advocacy trips to Sacramento and Washington, D.C., where they had a clear impact on impending legislation. Thank you for being our champions for justice. Remember when you also engaged in your own Christian service or in immersion trips that helped to create a world of greater solidarity, a precondition for justice. I will remember you as a class characterized not only by great successes in the most traditional and obvious ways, but as a class of empathy and compassion. Sadly, your tenure at Mitty was bracketed by the tragic and untimely deaths of two of your classmates, one just 3 weeks into his freshman year, the other 3 weeks from her graduation. Lucas and Kelsey are names that will forever be in the collective memory of the class of 2019. Your compassionate and prayerful support of these families has been inspiring to witness. And so one of my hopes for you as you leave this place today is this. We may not be able to fix or even explain all the painful realities we might encounter. Rather, we are called in faith to walk with those who mourn, to support and care for one another even in the darkest hours. You have done this, and on behalf of the Mitty community, I thank you. Graduates, I was struck when I read your yearbook last week by what appeared to be an underlying motif, intentional or not. Specifically, I was moved by how many times the words home and family were used. Most of the time, these words appeared in articles or captions in which students described their feelings about Mitty as a whole or about one aspect of the school. As in, Mitty feels like home to me, or Student Gov seems very much like a family. I first became aware of this underlying theme when I read the article about Soror, your classmate and my group co-leader on the January Kairos. The article is about Soror's trip last summer to Pakistan, where she had the honor of painting a mural of her own design. She writes, "The mural is about the idea of home. As I've grown through the ups and downs of life, I've found myself constantly seeking comfort in places, people, and experiences. That comfort is the feeling of home. And the mural is for any and all people who are searching for a home, for the homeless, refugees, those who feel unsafe in their houses, for those who simply need a little love, hug, or a hand." Graduates, as you anxiously prepare today and in the weeks ahead for leaving this very familiar place and your own homes, I invite you to join me in reflecting for just a few minutes this morning on the lessons of family. For ultimately, my hope for you, my prayer for you, my sage advice for you today is to be about family. For the past 4 years, we've tried to be, at least in some small measure, a family for you. We've tried to be in many ways your transitional family, your proverbial home away from home. When by necessity and God's design, you have come to view some of your parents' admonitions as the rambling drivel of aging fools, perhaps you've been able to make a human connection with one of these teachers, coaches, counselors, administrators, or staff members. And with that connection, you've consciously or unconsciously found a family here. For despite the intense human need to strain toward independence and self-reliance, there remains a corollary need for the bonds and connections of family, biological and beyond. Graduates, before you leave here today, I invite you to reflect upon what we learn in family, whether in your own or a family such as Mitty. In family, we learn how to fight fairly. And in family, we learn how to forgive. In family, we learn how to laugh, to be silly, to smile at those memories that only other family members share. In family, we learn how to grieve. We learn that we can endure almost any pain. In family, we learn self-sacrifice. We learn at a young age that it is the other's turn. In family, we learn the importance of tradition and ritual. We learn how birthdays and holidays must be celebrated, that the Christmas tree gets purchased on this day and gets placed in this corner of the living room. To do so otherwise, we learn, would be heresy. In family, we learn the essential human and Christian lesson of hospitality. We learn that home is not just, according to Robert Frost, the place where, when you have to go there, they have to take you in. Nor is home a place where you are sullenly admitted. Rather, home is where you are welcomed by the people, the walls, the tiles on the floor, the flowers beside the door, the play of light, the very grass. In family, we learn the meaning of fierce loyalty. We learn that the brother we yell a variety of foul things at this morning is the same one we fiercely defend to his detractors later that same day. In family, ultimately, we learn what it means to love. And in family is where we find God. For as Scripture tells us, where love is, there is God. Note well here in this context, the Messiah was born into a family. Interestingly and meaningfully enough, he was not born in a house, but he was born into a home. Graduates, at least in some ways, big or small, I hope you've experienced family here at Mitty. I hope this is felt and continues to feel like home. And I hope and pray that these lessons learned in this family environment have been embraced and will sustain you as you move forward from this home, as well as your parents. And let me tell you, I have great confidence that you have learned and you will put these family lessons to good use. For I believe that you've been blessed to breathe some distinctly rarefied air these past 4 years. You've walked on hallowed ground here. This is a place of unapologetic optimism, where you've been allowed, no, encouraged to be spirited, hardworking, supportive, faith-filled, and even silly. But I have a serious challenge to throw at you this morning. I certainly hope you share my perception that this has been in many ways a family. But being about family is not merely finding places such as Midi where you feel comfortable, nor is it merely about building your own families and creating places where love abounds, though these are essential tasks. Ultimately, these families you experience and help create must propel you outward to bring the values learned in family to the larger, fractured world that often resembles anything but a family. As graduates of this Catholic school that has preached service and justice to you for 4 years now, you are now empowered to familiarize the world. Our task is to be advocates for the eradication of homelessness in all its forms, including the 7,959 human beings in Santa Clara County who have no shelter tonight. Graduates, you've been fed so that you can feed the hungry. Speak out against the racism you will encounter, I'm sure, in college and the workplace. See it as a crime against your human family. Speak up for the poor, the uneducated, the victims of oppression. Defend them as you would your embattled brother. We, your teachers, and most especially your parents, have provided you a home base from which to journey. Today, feel deeply your own connection to home so as to more sharply feel the hurt of those who belong to no place and no one. Be about family in the most profound sense. Finally, as many of you know have been to these events in the past, it's become a tradition that any graduation speech of mine should contain a reference to a contemporary movie. Well, today, I'm going to deviate from that practice just slightly. Hope this doesn't bother some of you. By referencing a contemporary play instead of a movie. Come From Away is a musical that tells the remarkable true story of what happened in Gander, Newfoundland, following the 9/11/2001 tragedy. When piloting her American Airlines flight from Paris to Dallas that fateful morning, Captain Beverly Bass was notified of the bombing of the World Trade Center. And she was also told that all U.S. airspace was closed. She was to divert her flight to Gander, Newfoundland, a small town on the northeastern tip of Canada. Within a few hours, 38 planes landed in Gander, effectively doubling the size of the town. Over the next week, the Ganderites welcomed the strangers and opened their hearts and their homes to literally thousands of those who had come from away. Within a matter of hours, every school, church, gym, meeting hall, all became shelters. And meals for 7,000 additional diners were prepared by people who stayed awake for days to make sure their guests had enough to eat. And dozens of phones and computers were made available so that the come-from-aways, as they came to be called, could check on families and assure them that they were okay. In short, during the week after 9/11, for the 7,000 stranded passengers and the people of Newfoundland, the island was a safe harbor in a world thrown into chaos. Graduates, there are many relevant lessons that can be drawn from this play, but perhaps none more significant than what is implied by the title itself. Those 7,000 strangers on 38 different planes did not come from a single city or even a specific country. Rather, they came from the purposely vague place called away. And yet, without regard to a specific country of origin or religion or SAT score, these strangers were welcomed and treated with kindness. The come-from-aways in our world today are the immigrant, the refugee, the homeless. Let us be fearless in our efforts to welcome all to the table. Graduates, may the God who entered this world as an infant and learned his world-changing lessons in a holy family bless you with all that living in a family can bring. Be about family. Do your best to eliminate homelessness in all its forms, and know that you always have a home here at Midi. May God bless you.